We're back with Michelle Gray. This information is below, and you'll see it on the screen as well. And we're back with Erik. I will say again, because I have to, it's OCD. I love you. And
Love
we
you
are going
much.
to start part 2 of the time travel session. Are you ready to rock and roll?
Eric's like, ready.
All right. One person asks, is astral traveling the same thing? What are the differences between time travel and astral traveling?
Um, well, astral traveling, he says, it there's different types of astral traveling as well. Astral traveling can be done in sleep state and also in waking state. So time travel would be like astral traveling in waking state. He says there are some differences. When we're speaking of time travel, we're speaking of going from one location to another. Astral traveling is more like a melting into
Mm,
uh, dimensions. He says he's showing it vibrationally like time travel. He shows us like from this point to this point, whereas astral traveling is like moving through dimensions. It's
oh,
more of a blending
oh,
experience, he says.
wow. Fascinating. Can you travel anywhere in the universe when you pass to the other side? Well, you've talked about that before, Erik. You've been everywhere.
Yes,
Surfing on
everywhere
the
and anywhere.
sun and yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay. Is the reality of time travel based more on frequency and feelings? Example like nostalgia and simplicity? Interesting. I don't quite understand that, but
Well, Eric says that's a good point because yes, when we're talking about our ability to naturally travel without the help of any technology, yes, because it is all frequency and vibration,
yeah.
because that's all there is, he says.
Yeah.
So when we go into, so he says right now, each and every one of us travel each day. And so he says, when we think of something, if you're wanting to travel back to the past, he says you can do this in meditation and go into the feelings in your emotion, the love, the nostalgia of an experience. So again, he shows me that picnic. Is it a picnic that you had with your grandparents? Was that a great time in your life? So you can put yourself in that emotional state. And he says it takes practice to do this,
Yeah.
but you could actually do this through meditation and interact with the emotion, interact with the memories that can also, he says, now this
Oh.
also sparks change in your current experience as well. Because when you change perceptions, when you have growing understanding and you do it through this process, it starts to change the reality you're experiencing.
So when you think back on a memory,
Mhm.
that's a form of time traveling, I guess.
Yes,
But if you
yes.
interact and realize, well, that fight really, you look at a different perspective spiritually, the argument, etc., then then what?
He says then you can change the perception to it.
Yeah.
So if
So you
that
change your own timeline in a way.
well, yes, because an example he says, so if you had a fight with somebody and you go back to that time and say you have more understanding, you can go
Yeah.
back into that fight, recalling the memory, recalling the feelings, recalling the interactions, and then he says applying the technique of implementing the things that you understand. So
Like forgiveness.
now you're,
Yeah.
yes, so you're forgiving the person. You're saying, now I understand why that happened. Thank you for that experience. So he says, by doing that, you change the relationship to that event. You
Okay.
change he says, your way that you relate, which then releases, he says, that's a form of letting go that releases energy that you no longer need, which has you then experience the current time differently. So he says, watch what happens when you do that. You may find that the person you had an argument with in your reality that you're not speaking with anymore, you start to see things pop up on your Facebook about them.
Oh,
You start to see, so you can change your experience in reality. You can
that's
change
cool.
that vibration. And he says that is a well worth practice
Yeah,
for all of us to do.
yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. And you change the present and future based on your time, you know, your
Yes.
walk down memory lane. Will future time travel tech
Yes.
focus on tuning us to the frequency of our desired time? Or will it be more about wormholes and other cool sci-fi stuff?
He says at that point it'll be more about the travel off of the earth, more about universal travel because our consciousness will be at a state where we won't require the same things that we think we
Yeah,
need
yeah,
right now.
yeah. Okay. Can advanced yogis and Buddhists time travel with the right techniques? For example, certain meditations, prayers, etc. I think we covered that.
Yes, yes. And he's actually showing um, some of them that are guiding other human beings. So appearing in their meditations, appearing like with their
Rebirth?
own practices, they're appearing with others that they may not have any physical connection with,
Yeah.
but they're two human beings here on earth. Yeah.
Oh my God. What's the bit of science fiction that comes the closest? Hope you say Star Trek 4 or Back to the Future, but for realsies. Cute.
Okay. Um, well, he's saying that they all have a little something because he says there's not one sci-fi movie or story out there that doesn't have a taste of reality, a
Yeah.
taste of what is possible. He says, why? Because it wouldn't even come into reality.
Yeah.
It wouldn't even come in through a consciousness if it didn't have some truth to it.
Yeah.
He's also saying Quantum Leap.
Oh yeah, Quantum Leap. I
Yeah,
remember that show. I loved
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right. What year was travel to the most and why? But first of all, would it be the past or the future? We'll start with that.
Um, he's actually saying what was traveled to the most. Now he's saying this actually, he's including remote viewing in this.
Yeah.
He says around JFK
Oh wow. Okay.
that there's a lot of focus and going back to around that time.
I
And he
bet.
says that he's saying like this has been going on for a while, and he says there's also a lot of traveling back to certain events that are alien connection or ET connections as
Oh,
well. So he's giving that time frame as being very heightened interest.
oh, interesting. Uh, is going ahead easier than going back?
Um, he says no, it's more to do with preference and where he goes. So if you are drawn to going to the future, it's going to be easier for you to do that. It
Okay.
depends on where that state of consciousness is.
Oh, okay. What are the rules? Do we have to not talk to others because it can affect our future? Things like that?
Well, he says so. We talked a bit about this, I think, in the first part because he
Yeah.
says
So go back and
it,
see part one, people.
yes, because interaction, he says viewing and interaction is a little bit of a tricky one. It's not really a yes or no with it, but he says for the sake of saying at this point in our evolution, he says interacting with ourselves or interacting with another being doesn't really happen, not physically. That doesn't happen in that way.
Yeah.
But he says uh, there is interaction that takes place from other beings going into reality. But that, again, he says, that has a lot to do with a soul contract and what is that sparking and why is that
Yeah.
happening. He's like, there's really no perfect one fits all answer to that.
Yeah, of course not. Why would it be easy? Can a person like travel to next week and see what Apple stock is and then make an investment based on that? Or is that something that's forbidden in time traveling rules? Or yeah, remote viewing or whatever.
um, he says you can and it is done. He says it gets done. People do this. He
Wow.
says sometimes they're right, sometimes they're not. It has all to do with technique and practice. But he also says like what's the intent behind it? Because there's a lot of reasons why that wouldn't necessarily work,
Yeah.
because the intent is like the power behind it,
Right. I mean,
the
is
engine.
even going back, I mean, going into the future and looking at the stock at that day, would that change that timeline of that stock? I mean, it's possible just the very traveling itself would alter things.
Yes, he goes, it could. And so this is where he says, like, if we're talking physically doing it, or are we consciously doing it? He goes, we're not really altering the whole timeline. We would be altering our own timeline. So he
Okay.
says it takes more to alter a
Oh, yeah.
mass,
Yeah.
like the bigger timeline. Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's the difference in going a week ahead to see what Apple's stock is selling for versus being psychic? Is there any,
Mm,
or
well,
looking at
he
lotto
says,
numbers?
because he says it's not, because how do we know what timeline you're going into? Because he
Yeah.
says there's many different strands available, and when
Oh,
it has
yeah.
to do with, he goes like, what's the weight on it emotionally? What's the, there's different things that can affect it. Now if someone is looking for someone else and they don't have a emotional connection to it, they may be able to get, depending on their level of skill, they may be able to get a an accurate reading, say a week ahead. But he says these things are, they're shifting, they're moving, is how he shows it. And
Yeah.
so it does take practice and skill to be able to go in and get those things. But he goes, when it comes to things like lottery numbers or stock, he says we have to remember that there are also contracts playing out with each individual. So
Yeah.
what is going to be able to be brought back, and the reasons for that, and what will that cause in choices. So he says
Oh,
again, we're
yeah.
looking at cause and effect and all of these other things
Oh,
with it
yeah. Oh,
as well.
God, I can imagine. So complicated. Is it possible
Mm-hmm.
to summon our future self or a future incarnation of our soul to time travel to the present and meet with us? Did we cover this in part one?
Yes, we did talk a little bit about this, and he says yes. He says, so we all have the ability to be able to call on another version of ourselves. So he says, which version would you like to connect with? So he says, if you're able to project and think of that version, because somebody might be saying, well, I don't know what that other version would be doing. He says, well, go into your mind and what do you see your future self as?
Yeah.
What is that coming up as? And bring that part of yourself back and ask that. He says, just like it's channeling, because
Yeah.
you're connecting to another consciousness, another point in consciousness. So
Mm.
you're bringing that point back, and you can question and ask. He says you can get a lot of good information to help guide yourself. The quality and the intention of why you want to connect will give you the quality of information you get back.
Oh, interesting. Oh, this is cool. Is Elon Musk a time traveler? He seems way out there and tried to force AI into humanity, not in a good way. I don't know. How does Eric feel about Elon wanting chip to put chips in human brains? So, is he a time traveler? Or maybe he just knows the future because he's astral traveled there, or because he's channels, or is a
He
psychic?
says he says there are beings that work with Elon Musk.
Hmm.
Um, some of them he has some conscious awareness to.
Wow.
Um,
So he knows that they are
he
ETs?
he oh, he knows. Yes, he
Wow. Is
knows that
he
there's
an
an
alien hybrid? He himself? Or is he an alien ET?
Eric says he's a hybrid.
Okay.
He doesn't identify with that, so he's not
Okay.
consciously identifying in that way. But he's also connected, Eric says, to many levels of information that not everybody else is connected to because of that. It's part of his purpose. And
Oh,
when Eric's
wow.
talking about the what they're
Chip?
talking about with the chip,
Yeah.
Eric says,
Neuralink. Yeah.
uh, okay, this is a trajectory of AI. And he's doing this like, this is why there's importance to us understanding the value of our own consciousness and of our own sovereignty, because there are things that are occurring in the world around us that will promise us things
Yeah.
that will give us experiences, but at what cost?
Oh,
He
yeah.
says.
I figured. All right, let me see. Will you guys ask Erik about the conspiracy going around about Donald Trump being a time traveler? There's a book called Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Adventure written by Ingersoll Lockwood in 1890. Wow. And there are many coincidences with Donald Trump, his son Barron, and the main character of this book named Barron. The conspiracy has been around since 2017, but I hadn't heard of it until recently. Is there any truth about that?
What Erik is saying is this is like tapping into consciousness and bringing the information. He says it was thought of as a story. So what was being brought through, it was, I'm creating a story. But he says, where was that story created from? It was created from all that is. It was created from the consciousness. So is it talking about the Donald Trump we know? Well, yes, there's pieces of that consciousness. He's
Yeah.
bringing me back to oh, who was the one that did all the predictions?
Oh, Nostradamus.
Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
Nostradamus. He's showing me a visual of that and kind of how that whole experience worked. And he says Nostradamus knew what he was doing. This person did not know. They were just bringing through information. So there is some truth to it, but it's like a synchronicity. It's like
Okay. So Donald
projecting.
Trump is not really a
No,
traveler from another. Okay, got it. Nor is Barron, I guess, huh? His son?
no,
Okay,
no.
cool. Is there a time machine hidden at the Vatican? I heard that
He
somewhere.
says he says no, but there's lots of information about the ability to travel in the
Mm.
Vatican
I bet there's a
and
lot of
other.
stuff. Yeah.
He says a lot of stuff that's there.
Well, why
Yes,
can't we access
information.
it?
He says it's information that some people remote view and have accessed some of it.
Yeah.
He says there's no time travel machine, but there's information about it
But
there.
okay. Wow.
Technology.
Hey, where is Jesus? I was thinking about this yesterday. Where is Jesus' physical body buried? Erik, can you ask Jesus? Where are you at? I mean, it seemed like that he survived the cross, according to him, and evidence shows he was in
France.
France. Yeah, France. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, France. Mm-hmm.
Have there been anyone? Has there been anyone on this earth ever who accidentally time traveled back to us from the future and invented something that exists in the future, but it was new to our past or present generations? So they came from the future accidentally, or maybe not accidentally, from the future and invented something that they already knew existed.
He says not quite in that format. Not quite in that format. He's actually bringing me the cell phone. The cell
Mm.
phone. But he's not showing it quite in that way. Like he's because there's not like one person that's done it.
Okay.
He's
So
showing me
maybe,
like technology. So this involves more than one person, and he's also showing me with the internet as well.
oh,
Um, okay, because he shows traveling, but there's not physical traveling in consciousness and bringing information that was spread or shared. So it's not one person, is what he's showing me. He's showing me many people over a course of time, period of time.
so sort of just channeling future information
Yes,
to
but he's
create
saying
something?
not all purposeful
Yeah,
channeling. So, not all of them knowing that that's what they're doing. So, in the way that this person is asking, is did somebody actually go get this information or see it and then bring it back and make it
right.
happen?
Or
He
they were
says in that,
already in the future, but came to our
yeah,
time with
right.
the knowledge to invent whatever.
He says not quite in that way.
It
Not quite in
reminds me
that
of
way.
this movie I watched recently called Yesterday. There's a global blackout, and all of a sudden, immediately, well, this guy gets hit by a bus, but immediately he realizes that and he's a musician, not a very good one. He realizes that the global memory of the Beatles was gone. You know, you go like, I have to, whatever. And when I'm 65, what do you mean when you're 65? And nobody heard of the Beatles. So he brings back all the songs and becomes a huge hit. So it kind of reminds me of that. Really good show. Really funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it. Erik, do you have anything else to say about time travel before we close?
He just says, time travel is changing. Everything is changing. So he says, guys, he says, remember that ceiling of your consciousness. He says, allow that ceiling to keep rising, keep asking questions.
Yeah.
He says, keep yourself open because there's so much. He says, even this subject matter, mom, he says it can get very deep and it can get really complicated for us to understand it. And he's just laughing because he says it took Michelle many times of drawing pictures of trying to understand timelines
Oh
and
God,
everything.
me. I can't.
But
The spaghetti thing really helped me.
yeah, yeah.
Y'all need to
But
go back to part one to
yes,
get that.
but he says he loves you all. And
Love you
he
too.
is up to many different little pranks and doing all kinds of things lately. So call on him because he's
All
quite
right.
excited to connect with everybody.
And yeah, you guys go to part one so you can hear about her daughters, the prank that Erik did. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you,
Okay.
Erik. I love you all.
Erik says, love you.
Bye bye.
Bye.